I never expected her voice to stay with me. It wasn't even something grand, just a simple hello, but it caught me off guard. For years I had trained myself to live quietly, to keep my heart tucked away, as if I were too old to deserve anything more than comfort. Love? That belonged to someone else, to the younger ones with smooth skin and hopeful eyes. Not me. I told myself that over and over. That's why the first time I saw her, standing with a book in her hands and a half-smile on her lips, my chest tightened in a way I didn't allow myself to admit. She was radiant in a way that wasn't loud or showy. It was the kind of radiance that made the air feel lighter, like spring had crept into a winter room. She looked young, too young. My first thought was a warning, she's too young for me. I held on to that thought like a shield, though I didn't understand why it suddenly felt so fragile. I should have walked away after that first meeting. It was a small bookstore, the kind of place where silence is heavier than words, but she noticed me struggling to reach for a book on the higher shelf. Without hesitation, she stepped closer, taller than me, and gently pulled it down. "Here," she said, her voice soft but confident, "this one looks like it's been waiting for you." Her fingers brushed mine when she handed it over, and I froze. I don't usually stumble, but my thank you came out uneven, clumsy. She smiled like she understood something about me that I wasn't ready to share. I should have left then. That's what I told myself. Just take the book, walk away, forget her face. But instead I lingered, asking her if she'd read it. She had, of course. She spoke about it with a passion that made me forget where I was. Every sentence she shared had this brightness, this pull, and for a moment I was carried into her world. I found myself laughing softly at her little jokes, shaking my head, trying to act like I wasn't charmed. But inside, I knew I was. And still, the voice in my head scolded me, "She's too young. Don't even think about it." I went home that evening with the book in my hand but her face in my mind. I hated myself a little for it. What business did I have even noticing her like that? 17 years separated us. 17 years of mistakes, heartbreaks, and a body that no longer looked like the girl I used to be. She deserved someone who matched her stride, not someone weighed down by time. That night I sat by my window, the book unopened on my lap. Instead of reading, I kept replaying her smile, the way her eyes stayed on me a second longer than they had to. My chest ached with something I hadn't felt in so long that I almost didn't recognize it, the dangerous stirring of hope. Days passed, but I couldn't shake her. I caught myself wondering if I'd see her again, then scolding myself for even caring. I told myself to bury it, but when something begins to touch the heart, burying it only makes it louder. I started to notice how empty my days had been before her. I went through life on autopilot, work, home, silence. I told myself I liked the quiet, that solitude was safer than risking love again. But after her, that silence started to feel heavy. It was like she had cracked a window in a room that had been sealed for years, and suddenly I could smell the air outside. I wanted more, even though I told myself I shouldn't. One afternoon, as I walked through the park on my way home, I saw her again. She was sitting on a bench with her hair tied back, scribbling something in a notebook. My stomach flipped in a way that felt ridiculous, childish even. I almost turned away. But she looked up at that exact moment, and her face lit up when she saw me. Not polite recognition, but a genuine glow, like she was actually glad. "You again," she said with a grin, closing her notebook. I laughed nervously, suddenly aware of how my hands didn't know where to rest. I told myself to keep the conversation short, casual. But nothing about her was casual. She had a way of pulling you in without trying, like a tide. We talked for longer than I intended, about little things at first, then about bigger things, dreams, disappointments, what it feels like to want more from life than people expect you to. She listened like no one had listened to me in years. I felt my walls bending under her gaze, and I hated how good it felt. When I got home that evening, I sat in the dark for a long time. Her words echoed in my head, her laughter warming places I thought had turned to stone. I should have been happy about it, but instead I felt torn apart. Every moment with her left me both lighter and more afraid. I couldn't stop thinking, she's too young for me. This will only end in heartbreak. But underneath all that fear was a truth I couldn't deny. She was already slipping past my defenses. And the thought terrified me more than it thrilled me. The next time I saw her, it wasn't by chance. I told myself I was only passing by, only taking a different route home, but the truth was less innocent. Some part of me was hoping, searching, wanting to catch even a glimpse of her. And when I spotted her sitting again in that little cafe by the corner, a coffee cup between her hands, I felt my chest tighten like I'd been holding my breath all day and only just let it go. She noticed me almost instantly, as though her eyes were tuned to mine, and she smiled. That smile, it was open, unafraid, filled with a warmth that I hadn't seen directed at me in so long. She gestured for me to join her, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and though every nerve in my body screamed at me to walk away, I found myself moving toward her table. I sat down across from her, stiff and cautious at first, unsure if I was doing something dangerous. She leaned forward slightly, her chin resting on her hand as she studied me, not in a way that felt invasive, but in a way that made me feel seen. "You look tired," she said softly, and I let out a nervous laugh, trying to brush it off. But the truth was, she wasn't wrong. I carried years of fatigue in my bones, years of pretending I was fine with being alone. "Long day," I muttered, though it wasn't really about the day, it was about my life. She tilted her head, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What do you do?" I told her about my job, about the routine that filled my days but didn't really feed my soul. She listened without interruption, nodding gently, her expression serious in all the right moments. When I finished, she sighed and said, "That sounds heavy. Don't you ever want something more?" The question slipped into me like a blade, precise and cutting. I wasn't used to people asking me things that reached past the surface. I wasn't used to anyone caring about what I wanted beyond my responsibilities. I swallowed hard and shrugged, pretending to take it lightly, but inside, I felt raw. She shifted the conversation toward herself, telling me about her writing, her restless energy, her hunger to experience life in all its chaos and beauty. She was younger, yes, but she carried herself with a kind of fire I had long ago smothered in myself. Listening to her felt like watching sunlight through a window I'd painted shut. It made me ache with envy, but also with admiration. Every story she shared, every laugh that slipped from her lips, drew me closer even as I tried to sit back. I noticed details I shouldn't have noticed, the way her hands moved when she spoke, the softness around her eyes when she laughed. I felt alive in her presence, and that scared me. When she asked me questions, she didn't let me hide behind short answers. "What do you love?" she asked suddenly, and I froze. No one had asked me that in years. Not "what do you do" or "how are you managing," but "what do you love?" I stumbled, trying to find an answer, and she leaned in closer, encouraging me without a word. Finally, I admitted something small, something I hadn't shared in a long time, that I loved the quiet moments before dawn, the stillness, the way the world felt untouched. Her smile softened, and she whispered, "That's beautiful." I felt my chest burn, not from embarrassment, but from the way her words wrapped around my secret like they cherished it. Hours passed without me noticing. The cafe emptied slowly, people coming and going, but we stayed in that little corner as though time had no power over us. I kept telling myself to leave, to cut this off before it became something I couldn't handle, but each time I considered it, she'd ask something else, and I'd stay. I told myself it was harmless, just a conversation, but deep down I knew it was more. There was something dangerous in the way she looked at me, as if she could see the parts of me I had hidden from the world for years and loved them anyway. At one point, she reached across the table to push my hair back from my face, a simple, almost casual gesture, but it felt intimate, like it belonged in a space we hadn't yet defined. My breath caught, and she seemed to notice. For a second, I thought she might pull away, but she didn't. Instead, she held my gaze and said softly, "You don't have to hide with me." I nearly broke then and there. My instinct was to laugh it off, to shield myself with humor or indifference, but her sincerity pinned me in place. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I had nothing to hide, but the truth pressed against my lips like a confession waiting to escape. I didn't say it. I couldn't. Not yet. When I finally stood to leave, my hands trembled slightly as I gathered my things. She stood too, walking me out into the cool evening air. We paused on the sidewalk, the world around us busy with cars and footsteps, but for a moment, it felt like it was only us. "I'll see you again," she asked, not demanding, not pleading, just hopeful. I hesitated, torn between yes and no, between fear and desire. And then, before I could stop myself, I nodded. Her smile widened, and she whispered, "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." As I walked away, I repeated the same warning to myself, "She's too young. This is dangerous. This will only hurt." But underneath all those fears, my heart was already betraying me, beating faster at the thought of the next time I'd see her. The next time we met, it felt different. Familiar, yet heavier, as if the air between us carried something unspoken. She greeted me with that same brightness, but I noticed the way her eyes lingered on me, almost studying me, like she could sense the hesitation I carried around like armor. I told myself again that I shouldn't be here, that every word we exchanged was a step closer to something I wasn't supposed to feel. And yet, I stayed. We walked together that evening, not toward anywhere in particular, just letting the streets lead us. The city hummed around us, lights flickering on as the day surrendered to night. She asked questions the way she always did, fearless, curious, unwilling to let me stay on the surface. "What was the happiest moment of your life?" she asked, her voice soft, her steps slowing as she looked at me. My throat tightened. No one had asked me that in years. My mind went back to times I thought I had locked away, moments when love was simpler, when I thought forever meant something. I almost told her I didn't know, but the truth pressed against me until it spilled out. I told her about a morning long ago, when I had woken up next to someone I loved and felt, just for a little while, that the world was whole. My voice cracked as I said it, because that moment had been buried under years of disappointment and loneliness. She didn't laugh. She didn't judge. She just nodded, her eyes glistening as if she understood more than I wanted her to. Then she shared something of her own, a story about feeling out of place, about searching for connection in a world that seemed determined to misunderstand her. She spoke about being told she was too young to know what she wanted, too reckless, too naive. But her voice was steady, defiant, and as I listened, I realized we carried different burdens but the same ache. The ache of being told we were wrong for wanting what we wanted. Her honesty shook me. It was raw, stripped of the careful walls I had spent years constructing around my own truths. And with every word she gave me, I felt mine starting to crack. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her she wasn't alone, that her fire lit something in me I thought was dead. But instead, I shoved my hands into my pockets and swallowed the words, afraid they would come out sounding like too much. As we reached the park, the silence between us grew heavier, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick with things neither of us had yet dared to say. She sat on a bench, and I joined her, our shoulders brushing just enough to remind me of the space that wasn't really there. The night was cool, and she leaned back, looking up at the stars. You know, she said after a long pause, people spend so much time worrying about the rules. What's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable? But none of that really matters, does it? What matters is what makes us feel alive. Her words hit me hard, like she had peeled away the excuses I had been clinging to. My chest tightened, and I wanted to argue, to tell her that rules did matter, that the 17 years between us weren't just numbers but a canyon impossible to cross. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Because deep down, I knew she was right. I had stopped chasing what made me feel alive a long time ago, trading it for safety, for silence, for the dull ache of solitude. Sitting there beside her, I realized how much I had missed it, the rush of being seen, the warmth of being wanted. I turned to look at her, and she was already watching me. Her eyes didn't flinch, didn't shy away. It felt like she was daring me to admit the truth. And in that moment, I almost did. I almost told her that I thought about her every night, that her laughter haunted my quiet hours, that she was pulling me into a place I had sworn I'd never go again. But I didn't. Instead, I forced a smile and whispered something safe, something small. She didn't call me out on it. She just smiled back, like she knew the words I hadn't said were still hanging between us, waiting for the right moment to be born. The night grew colder, and she offered me her scarf, draping it around my shoulders with a tenderness that undid me. Her fingers lingered just a second too long against my neck, and my pulse betrayed me, racing under her touch. She must have felt it, but she didn't mention it. Instead, she leaned closer and said quietly, "You don't have to be afraid of me." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let those words sink into the cracks of my heart and stay there. But fear was stubborn, louder than reason. I nodded, but the truth was tangled inside me. As I walked home later, wrapped in her scarf, her scent clinging to me, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because she had given me pieces of her heart, heavier because I was still too afraid to give her mine. And yet, no matter how many times I told myself to stop, to pull away before it was too late, I knew I wouldn't. Something in me had already chosen her, even if my words hadn't. I didn't expect it to happen the way it did. I thought if something between us ever shifted, it would be gradual, cautious, a slow unraveling of the walls I'd built. But life doesn't wait for permission, and that night, everything I had tried to bury began to surface. We had met at the park again, almost by accident, though by now I couldn't pretend I didn't want to see her. The air was crisp, the kind that carried the smell of fallen leaves and hinted at winter on the horizon. She was already there when I arrived, sitting cross-legged on the grass with her notebook in her lap. When she saw me, her face lit up in a way that made something inside me break. She waved me over, and I sat beside her, trying to ignore how natural it felt. We talked about nothing at first, the weather, a book she was reading, the way the city felt quieter that evening. But there was an undercurrent, a tension that hummed between us like a secret waiting to be spoken. At one point, she leaned closer to show me something she had written, her hair brushing against my cheek. My body reacted before my mind could stop it. I inhaled sharply, and every nerve in me came alive. She noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. Her eyes lingered on mine, searching, as if asking a question without words. My throat went dry, and I looked away, pretending to study the page she had shown me. But then she whispered something so soft I almost missed it. "Why do you keep running from this?" The words hit me like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything I had tried to keep calm. I froze, my heart thundering. She didn't move away, didn't give me the chance to hide. She simply waited, her gaze steady, her presence unyielding. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to insist she had imagined it all. But when I finally turned back to her, the truth was there in my eyes, raw and exposed. I couldn't hide it anymore. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She reached for my hand then, slow and deliberate, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. The warmth of her fingers wrapped around mine, and it felt like the first breath after drowning. My heart ached with both fear and relief. She held my hand gently, not as if she was claiming it, but as if she was offering me something, safety, maybe, or the chance to be seen without judgment. 17 years, I whispered, my voice breaking. "You're too young." "I'm too," she cut me off before I could finish, her voice steady, calm, but filled with something fierce. 17 years don't matter to me. What matters is this. What I feel when I'm with you. Do you feel it too? Her words were a blade and a balm all at once. I wanted to resist, to cling to the excuses I had rehearsed in the dark, but my defenses crumbled. The truth slipped out, quiet but undeniable. Yes. The moment stretched between us, heavy and fragile. She smiled then, not triumphant, not smug, but tender, as if she had been waiting patiently for me to let go of my chains. She leaned her forehead against mine, and I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the closeness. For the first time in years, I let myself simply feel. All the doubts, the whispers of what others might say, the fear of looking foolish, they didn't vanish, but they grew smaller in her presence. She whispered again, her words brushing against me like a promise. You don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. Not with me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to give in completely, to surrender to the warmth she offered. But even as tears burned behind my eyes, I knew it wouldn't be simple. Love never is. Still, as we sat there, hand in hand under the fading sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Hope. For a moment, the 17 years between us melted away, and all that remained was the undeniable truth that my heart, against every warning I had given it, had chosen her. The days that followed felt like walking a thin line between fear and freedom. I woke each morning with her in my thoughts, her laughter echoing in my mind like a song I couldn't turn off. At night, I replayed the way her hand had felt in mine, the warmth of her words, the way her forehead had rested so gently against mine as though we were already something more. And yet, as much as my heart leaned toward her, my mind dragged me back into the shadows. I told myself again and again that it couldn't work, that it was wrong, that the 17 years between us were a canyon that love could not possibly bridge. But then I'd see her, and all those rehearsed doubts would scatter like frightened birds. She had a way of looking at me that stripped away the years, that made me forget the lines on my face or the heaviness of my past. To her, I wasn't too old or too much. To her, I was simply me, and that was enough. One evening, we sat together on a quiet bench as the world around us moved on in its usual rush. She leaned into me, her shoulder pressing softly against mine, and I felt my chest ache with both joy and terror. I wanted to wrap my arm around her, to claim that closeness, but my hesitation held me back. She noticed, she always noticed, and without asking, she took my hand, lacing our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. My breath caught. She turned her head and whispered, "You're overthinking again." I laughed nervously, trying to play it off, but she didn't let go of my hand. "You worry about what people will say, don't you?" she asked, her voice calm, not accusing. I swallowed hard and nodded. "They'll think it's wrong. They'll think I'm taking something from you, that I don't belong at your side." She squeezed my hand, firm and steady. "And since when did strangers get to decide what's right for us? Let them think whatever they want. They don't know me. They don't know you. They don't know what this feels like." Her words sank into me, soft but relentless, pulling me toward a truth I had been too afraid to face. I looked at her then, really looked at her, the fire in her eyes, the stubborn courage in her voice, the way she held my hand as if it was hers to protect. And in that moment, I felt something shift. She was younger, yes, but she carried a strength I had long forgotten how to hold in myself. She wasn't naive. She wasn't fragile. She knew exactly what she wanted, and for reasons I couldn't fully understand, what she wanted was me. Still, the doubts gnawed at me. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I traced the lines around my eyes, the gray in my hair, the weight of years etched into my body. I thought about how she looked when she laughed, the lightness in her step, the youth that seemed to radiate from her without effort. I asked myself how long it would take before she realized she deserved someone who could match her stride, someone who wouldn't hold her back. My chest tightened with the thought, and for a moment I considered walking away, ending it before it even truly began. But then I remembered her words, "You don't have to be afraid of me," and I remembered the way she held my hand like she meant it. So instead of running, I let myself hold on to the memory of her. I let myself imagine what it would be like to stop fighting and simply fall. When we met again a few days later, she was radiant in her usual way, but there was something different too, something softer in her eyes, as though she knew I was battling storms inside myself. She didn't push me. She didn't demand answers. Instead, she simply stayed close, giving me the space to breathe, the space to feel safe. At one point, she brushed a stray strand of hair behind my ear and whispered, "I don't care how old you are. What I care about is how you make me feel. You make me feel safe. You make me feel alive. Isn't that what love is supposed to be? Her words undid me. My throat tightened, tears stung at the back of my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't fight them. I let them fall. She wiped one away with her thumb, her touch so gentle it broke me open in ways I hadn't thought possible. I wanted to argue, to push her away for her own good, but instead I leaned into her, my forehead resting against her shoulder. I'm scared, I whispered. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let myself have this. She wrapped her arms around me, holding me close, her voice steady and sure. Then let me show you. One day at a time. You don't have to know everything right now. Just let yourself feel it. That's all I ask. In her embrace, the years didn't matter. The fear didn't matter. For the first time in so long, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. And though the doubt still lingered, whispering at the edges of my mind, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: she was right. Love wasn't about numbers, or rules, or what the world thought was acceptable. It was about this, the safety, the warmth, the undeniable truth that my heart had found its way back to life in her hands. It was almost too easy to believe we could exist in a little bubble untouched by the world. With her beside me, I felt lighter, freer, like the years I carried were nothing more than numbers fading into the background. But life has a way of reminding you that bubbles always burst. The first crack came when someone I knew saw us together. We were at a cafe, laughing over something silly, her hand brushing mine on the table as though it belonged there. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a familiar face, a colleague, someone who knew me well enough to recognize when something was out of the ordinary. Their eyes lingered a little too long, their mouth tightening in a way that carried judgment. I felt my stomach twist, my laughter dying in my throat. She noticed the change instantly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I shook my head, trying to brush it off, but the damage was done. For the rest of that afternoon, the ghost of that look haunted me. All the doubts I had worked so hard to silence came roaring back, louder and sharper than ever. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy. The words I had been afraid of for weeks finally surfaced: "They're going to judge us. They're going to say it's wrong. They're going to say I'm wrong." The next time I saw her, I was quieter than usual. She reached for my hand, and though I didn't pull away, my fingers didn't curl into hers the way they usually did. She noticed immediately. "You're shutting down on me," she said softly, her voice not accusing but aching. I sighed, unable to meet her eyes. "People will talk," I whispered. "They'll see us, and they'll think I'm some pathetic woman trying to steal your youth. They'll say I'm selfish for wanting this, for keeping you from someone your own age." My voice cracked on the last words, and I hated how small I sounded. She was silent for a moment, and I braced myself for her to agree, for her to finally realize what I had been telling myself all along. But instead, she shifted closer, her hand firm against mine, her eyes unwavering. "Let them talk," she said simply. "They don't know what this is. They don't know what you mean to me." I shook my head, tears threatening. "You don't understand. I've lived long enough to know how cruel people can be. They'll tear us apart. They'll tell you I'm wrong for you, and one day you might believe them. And I don't know if I could survive losing you like that." My chest ached with the confession, raw and trembling. She didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted my chin until my eyes met hers. "Do you think I don't know what I want?" she asked, her voice fierce but gentle. "I've fought my whole life to be seen, to be heard, to love without apologizing. And now I've found you, and you think I'd let strangers decide for me? No. This is my choice. You are my choice." Her conviction left me breathless. For a long moment, I just stared at her, my tears blurring the edges of her face. No one had ever chosen me so fearlessly before. I wanted to believe her, but the fear inside me was stubborn, clinging to every scar I had ever carried. What if they're right? I whispered. She leaned closer until our foreheads touched, her voice steady, unshakable. They're not. What we have is real. What we have is ours. And I'm not letting anyone take it away from me. Something in me cracked open then. I let the tears fall freely, leaning into her, letting her arms wrap around me like a shield. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe, truly believe, that maybe this love was stronger than the voices of the world. Still, the fear lingered at the edges, whispering that happiness was fragile, that people like me weren't meant to hold it for long. But when she kissed my temple and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere," I felt a flicker of courage ignite inside me. Maybe she was right. Maybe love wasn't about silencing the world, it was about daring to love anyway, even when the world shouted against it. The choice to stop running from her came quietly, almost without ceremony, but it felt like the most daring decision of my life. I had spent weeks drowning in fear, waiting for the weight of judgment to crush me, waiting for her to realize she deserved something easier, something less complicated. But instead of leaving, she stayed. She stayed through my silences, through my restless nights, through my walls that rose and fell like tides. And one evening, as we sat together on her couch, her legs tucked under her and her eyes focused entirely on me, I finally let the truth take its place in the open. I reached for her hand first this time, surprising even myself. My fingers curled into hers, trembling, but I didn't let go. She looked at me, her expression soft, waiting, as though she could sense what was coming but didn't want to rush me. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but steady. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." Her smile was small at first, then it bloomed, radiant and tender, and she squeezed my hand as if to anchor me to the ground. "Then don't," she whispered back. "Just be here. With me." The simplicity of her words broke something inside me. For years, love had been complicated, tangled in conditions, rules, and disappointments. But with her, it wasn't about perfect timing or fitting into expectations. It was about presence, about showing up even when it terrified me. I leaned into her, resting my head against her shoulder, and she wrapped her arm around me. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel like I was holding up the sky by myself. I allowed myself to relax into her warmth, into the steady rhythm of her breathing, into the safety she had offered me since the very beginning. As days passed, I stopped pretending. I stopped calling her just a friend in my mind. I stopped dismissing the way my chest ached when she smiled at me, the way my whole body felt alive when her hand brushed against mine. I let myself feel, fully and without apology. It wasn't an overnight transformation. The fear still whispered, sometimes louder than I wanted to admit. But each time it tried to take over, she was there to remind me with a glance, a touch, a word, that love was not something shameful or forbidden. It was ours, and it was worth protecting. One night, we were walking under the streetlights, our hands brushing but not yet holding, and I finally stopped in my tracks. She turned to me, a question in her eyes, and I took her hand firmly, pulling her closer. My heart was racing, my throat tight, but I managed to get the words out. "I need you to know. I love you." The silence that followed was heavy, terrifying, but she didn't hesitate. Her arms wrapped around me in an instant, holding me so tightly I felt like the pieces of me that had been scattered for years were finally being pulled back together. "I love you too," she whispered against my hair, and I felt the world tilt, not in chaos but in alignment. We kissed for the first time that night, not rushed, not desperate, but slow and deliberate, like we'd both understood the weight of what it meant. Her lips were soft, her hands steady, and for once, I didn't care about the 17 years, the looks, the whispers, the doubts. All I cared about was her, and the way she made me feel like love had found me again when I thought it never would. In that moment, I realized the years weren't chains, they were proof. Proof that love could survive time, fear, judgment, and still bloom when it was ready. And though I knew challenges would come, I also knew I wasn't facing them alone anymore. I had chosen her. She had chosen me. And that was enough. The days after our confession felt like stepping into a world I had been watching from a distance but never dared to enter. Everything looked the same, the streets, the sky, the quiet corners of the cafe where we had once danced around our feelings, but everything felt different because now I allowed myself to belong to it, to her, without apology. We no longer pretended to be strangers passing time together. Our hands found each other naturally, our smiles came easier, our silences were filled with comfort instead of hesitation. I had spent so long carrying shame like a shadow that I didn't recognize the lightness of finally walking free from it. There were still moments when fear crept in, when I would catch a stranger's eyes lingering on us too long or hear the echo of my own doubts whispering that I was too old, too worn, too undeserving. But every time, she was there to anchor me. She never fought me with arguments or demanded I silence my fears. Instead, she reminded me with her presence that what we had was real, and real love doesn't need permission. One evening, as we sat on her balcony watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, I told her something I had never admitted aloud. I thought love was finished for me, I said quietly, my voice almost lost to the wind. I thought those years of passion and fire and hope were behind me, and all I had left was surviving. She turned to me then, her eyes shimmering in the fading light, and placed her hand against my cheek. "And now?" she asked. I took a breath, feeling the truth swell in my chest, warm and terrifying. "Now I feel alive again. Like the years I thought I lost weren't wasted, they were just waiting for this." She smiled then, that smile that always melted me, and whispered, "Maybe they were teaching you how to recognize it when it finally came." Her words sank deep, and I realized she was right. Every scar, every lonely night, every wall I built had shaped me into the person who could sit here now and cherish this love with all the strength of someone who knew what it meant to almost lose hope. I wasn't ashamed of the 17 years anymore. They weren't a curse, they were a gift, because they allowed me to see how rare this kind of connection truly was. I no longer saw myself as someone who had stolen her youth or kept her from something better. I saw myself as someone who had been chosen, fully and fearlessly, by a woman who knew exactly what she wanted. And in turn, I chose her with everything I had, not in spite of the years but because they made me brave enough to love her without conditions. As the sky darkened, she leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder, and I realized that love had finally come not when I was looking for it, not when I thought I deserved it, but when I was willing to let it find me. I had wasted so much time thinking about what the world might say, about how I might look in their eyes. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was her hand in mine, her laughter filling the empty spaces of my life, her voice reminding me every day that it was never too late to be loved. And as I held her close, I understood something I wished I had known years ago. Love doesn't measure years, or bend to rules, or wait for approval. Love simply arrives, quiet and insistent, And if you are brave enough to open your heart, it will melt away every fear, every doubt, every barrier, even 17 years that once felt impossible. She had taught me that. She had given me that. And in return, I promised myself that I would never again let fear steal what we had found. Because this was more than love. This was freedom. This was life beginning again, in the arms of the woman who made time itself feel irrelevant.